Good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. We're currently reading and discussing the book, The Papacy and the Civil Power, and if you listened yesterday, we began to hear what this author had to say about the papacy's so-called universal jurisdiction. That as Christ is the full, free, and sovereign king of the universe, so is the papacy. That the papacy, as the replacement of Christ on earth, or as the representative of Christ on earth, he should have the full, free, and sovereign jurisdiction over every man, woman, and child in whatever nation they live. And that no man may legitimately call the papacy a foreign prince, any more than they could call Jesus Christ a foreign prince. So the logic holds that if an American, whether he be Roman Catholic or Protestant, would protest the Pope's interference into our government, the Pope would simply say, I am not a foreign king. I am a domestic king with divine right to rule over you and your government. Now, this is the assertion of the papacy, and it's been held for centuries. And it's no more or less held today than ever in its history. The papacy claims to be the divine right ruler over every nation, and any nation that usurps the authority of the papacy or calls him a foreign king is heretical and should be uprooted and replaced with a government that acknowledges the papacy's full, free, and sovereign rulership. Now, we're going to back up a paragraph. It says, the Pope is not a foreign prince to any Christian, to any human being. That's a quote from the author of this book that was widely, it was republished and widely distributed by the Lord Bishop of Beverley in England, of all places, a Protestant nation. He said the Pope is not a foreign prince to any Christian, to any human being. No one can call him an illegitimate foreign interference into any local government. Now, the reader should not pass this by too quickly. It is worthy of reflection, says R.W. Thompson. The last proposition is stated negatively, but it has an affirmative meaning, which is that the Pope is prince and governor over all Roman Catholics, over every human being, no matter where or under what government they live. Although he resides in Rome and is crowned there as a foreign prince, he is nevertheless a domestic one, a domestic king, a domestic prince in every country, especially where there are Roman Catholics, because God's authority is universal and he is in the place of God on earth. As the spiritual governor of the world, he is also its political governor, insofar as political teachings are necessary to the Roman Catholic Church, because the greater includes the lesser. Therefore, when he finds the faithful living under a government which denies this and is consequently infidel, he, the Pope, has the right to require that they, every individual Roman Catholic, shall come forward in a political way and compel such dissenting and heretical government to obey the law of God by recognizing the Pope's supremacy, or that they shall disobey the government when it refuses to do so. In other words, when it refuses to acknowledge the Pope's supremacy. So there you have it, the Pope's divine right usurpation of every government on earth, and the command that every Roman Catholic is to raise the papacy to control over that government if it does not accept the Pope's supremacy. That makes every Roman Catholic a potential fifth column for a government, for a coup, a political coup in this country. And this is why you see Roman Catholics so active in politics. And they're even dragging the so-called Protestants into political activity in this country. And the purpose of which is to overthrow our Protestant governments and institutions and constitution, and replace it with Roman Catholic canon law. That's tyranny. That's the age-old system, the old world order, restored. And they're using Christians to do it. Raising Antichrist to a sovereign power, not only in this country, but the world. Now, he goes on to say, for this purpose, that is, for the purposes of this discussion, the Pope is not a foreign but a domestic prince, having authority from God to step in between the citizen and his government, and to require him, that is the Roman Catholic, so to act and vote that the universality of the Pope's power in all religious, social, and political, and I would just add the word appropriately now should contain the word economic matters, shall be established according to the canons of the Roman Catholic Church. That's the intent, that every religious, social, and political matter should be established according to the canons of the Roman Catholic Church. That's an overthrow of our government. That's the overthrow and destruction of Protestantism. Now, he continues, he says, but it must not be supposed that this author is alone in setting forth this extraordinary defense of papal sovereignty. It has the direct and positive sanction of Pope Pius IX, whose voice is claimed to be as potent as that of God's. But to put an end to a recent controversy between the Roman Catholic Church and the Armenian Christians of Cilicia, the Pope addressed to them an encyclical letter on the 6th day of January of 1873. These quote-unquote Oriental dissidents, as the Pope calls them, had insisted that in his attempt to control the appointment of their bishops and to prescribe the rules for the management and sale of their church property, he had acted as a foreign power, interfering in the external affairs of states and the governments of the peoples, unquote. This, he insists, is calumnious, and thus defends his sovereignty thus, quote, it is easy to understand how false and contrary to good sense and to the divine economy of the Roman Catholic Church are all such suppositions. First, it is false that the Roman pontiffs have ever exceeded the limits of their power and interfered in the civil administration of states, and that they have usurped the rights of princes. If the Roman pontiffs are exposed to this calumny because they make regulations for the election of bishops and the sacred ministers of the church, and about the causes or other affairs which concern the ecclesiastical discipline called exterior, then of two things, one, either men ignore or else they resist the divine and immutable organization of the Roman Catholic Church. It has ever been and ever will remain stable and cannot be subject to change, especially in those countries where the proper liberty and security of the Roman Catholic Church have been assured by the decrees of the heads of state. In other words, those who have concordats with the Vatican. In fact, as it is of faith that the Church is one, and that the Roman Pontiff is her head, and the father and teacher of all Christians, he cannot be called a foreigner to any Christians or to any of the particular churches of Christians, at least unless it be asserted that the head is foreign to the limbs, the father foreign to the son, and the master to the scholars, and the shepherd to the flock. That's right, the Pope calls himself the head, the father, the master, and the shepherd to every man, woman, and child. He's a nuclear-powered blasphemer. Listen to what he calls himself: the head, the father, the master, and the shepherd. It is no more right to assert that the papacy, the Pope of Rome, is a foreigner in any land than it is to say that Christ is a foreigner in any land. And then he blasphemously claims the titles of God: the head, the father, the master, and the shepherd. Here's another quote. It says, "Moreover, those who hesitate not to call the apostolic see a foreign power rend the unity of the church by that mode of speech." In other words, if you call the papacy a foreign power, and you're willfully, you don't hesitate to call the papacy a foreign power, then you tear the Roman Catholic Church asunder. You break its unity by that mode of speech. Again, he says, "Moreover, those who hesitate not to call the apostolic see a foreign power rend the unity of the church by that mode of speech, or furnish a pretext for schism, since they thereby deny to the successor of the blessed Peter the rights of universal pastor, and by consequence fail in the faith due to the Catholic Church, if they are of the number of her sons, or they assail the liberty that is her due, if they do not belong to her." In other words, this is a crime if committed both by Catholics and non-Catholics alike, claiming his jurisdiction over all people. He's very consistent here. And he says, "For our Lord Jesus Christ has manifestly made it a duty for the sheep to know and hear the voice of the shepherd and to follow it, and on the contrary, to fly from the stranger, for they know not the voice of strangers," unquote. If then the sovereign pontiff, the Pope, be deputed external, that is, a stranger to any particular churches, that church will also be a stranger to the apostolic see, and consequently to the Roman Catholic Church, which is founded on the words of the Lord to Peter. They that separate from that foundation do not retain the divine and Catholic Church, but they are striving to make a human church, which, being held together only by the human tie of nationality, as they say, is not any longer bound together by means of its priests, firmly attached to the see of Peter, and cannot share in its solidarity, nor be any longer in the universally formed and indissolute unity of the Catholic Church. That's right. If you assert that the papacy is a foreign interference in your government, you're no longer part of the Church of Jesus Christ. You've literally excommunicated yourself. That's what he's asserting here. That's what he's asserting here. And that was reiterated by Pope Benedict XVI most recently, when he said that the Protestant churches are not churches in the proper sense because they don't share in the apostolic succession. In other words, they don't accept the free, full, and sovereign rule of the Pope. So they cannot be called churches in the proper sense. They are ipso facto excommunicated. And it is their duty to reunite with the Roman Catholic Church, to repent of Protestantism, and to come into full communion with the papacy. This isn't this is not an ancient and discredited belief of the papacy. This is a current one. Anybody who regards the papacy as a foreign interference, first of all, doesn't accept the universality of the Pope, nor do they accept his divine right political power. You're a heretic. You're a schismatic, and you are to be rooted out, you and your government both. Now, the author at this point includes a note. It says, the encyclical of Pope Pius IX, from which the above extract is taken, will be found at length in the New York Freeman's Journal and Catholic Register of April 19, 1873, where it is published on account of its alleged, quote-unquote, permanent importance. In a previous number of the same paper, that of April 5, 1873, this same extract, with some verbal differences in translation, was asserted, accompanied by the following editorial remarks. Now listen to these remarks. Quote, it seems hard to believe that men of sense will get frightened at the charge that we Catholics and our bishops are bound to believe and to do what the Vicar of Christ commands, because this head of the church on earth resides not here, but in Rome. The Vicar of Christ has himself continually declared that he cannot change the doctrines nor the morals of the church. If what he commands is but the truth that has been from the very beginning, what difference is it whether he resides in Rome or in Washington, D.C.? But if another answer is wanted, the Bishop of Rome is not a foreigner. He belongs to us, and we belong to him. Rome is not a foreign city. It does not belong to Italy. It belongs to all Christendom. And the Pope, residing in Rome, is not an alien from any of his Catholic flock. Unquote. So there you have it. You can't call the Pope a foreign interference. As a matter of fact, you can't even claim that he interferes in your government, because no government is lawful unless it submits to the divine right, sovereign rule of the Pope. He's the fountainhead of every government. As the vicar and replacement of the Son of God on earth, he is King of kings and Lord of lords. He cannot be called a foreign king, and he cannot be called a usurper or an interferer in the governments of mankind. Now the author continues, it is deemed just to those who are now endeavoring to convert the power of a foreign prince into a domestic power in the United States to give the precise language of the Pope as furnished by a translation which it is said has the approval of Archbishop Manning, a Roman Catholic archbishop in America. The reader will thereby be enabled to see the process by which this conversion is to take place and the grounds of its justification. What does Pope Pius IX mean when he says that no Roman pontiffs have ever exceeded the limits of their power and interfered in the civil administration of states? This and nothing less, that when they have dictated to the governments, when the popes have dictated to governments, denounced, excommunicated, and dethroned kings, resisted constitutions and laws, and released peoples from their oaths of allegiance to their nations, they have simply exercised their divine authority. Because in every instance, they were condemning heresy. For this purpose, the Pope's power extends over the whole world and is not foreign to any government on the earth. Whatsoever, therefore, he may find it necessary to do in order to advance the welfare of the Roman Catholic Church, extend its borders, and provide for his own dominion as the vicar of Christ, he has the rightful power to do, and in doing it becomes a domestic governor in all states. As such domestic governor, he has also the right to require that the faithful, that they shall resist and put out of the way everything, every constitution and law that is in conflict with his ideas of the divine purpose. And in case of refusal, the refractory dissenter is to be visited with the curses of the church, with excommunication and anathema. All this, says the Pope, is necessary to the, quote, proper liberty and security of the Catholic Church, unquote, and therefore those who do not yield to him these extraordinary prerogatives fail in the faith and become heretics and unbelievers. Hence we have the distinct announcement that from the throne, ex cathedra, which makes it infallible, by the vicar of Christ himself, that it is a part of the religious faith of the Church that these prerogatives, that is, the Pope's sovereignty, shall be conceded to him. In other words, that he is a domestic governor throughout all the United States, that all the faithful are bound to obey him in whatsoever shall concern the Church, and if there be anything in our Constitution or laws adverse to the Church, in his opinion, he has the divine right to require them to resist it by their votes or otherwise, they being bound to implicit and uninquiring obedience. Do you see where this is going? This is headed for a violent and bloody uprising in this country. Roman Catholics, faithful and obedient to the Pope on the one side, and God's people on the other. Now he says, we've already seen in how many things the principles of our Protestant institutions are in conflict, that is, direct conflict with the teachings of the Papacy, and shall hereafter have occasion to see what the popes have done in other governments in order to establish harmony between their civil polity and the canon laws of the Roman Catholic Church. We can scarcely claim exemption from the charge of ignorance if these lessons of history do not teach us wisdom. That's right. Ignorance is not bliss. Roman Catholicism in this country, from the hierarchy to the Catholic street sweeper, are working to change the laws of this country to make them consistent and compatible, or to replace them altogether with Roman Catholic canon law. This is becoming a church-state Roman Catholic nation and a crusader to conquer the rest of the world. R.W. Thompson says, most wisely, we can scarcely claim exemption from the charge of ignorance if these lessons of history do not teach us wisdom. R.W. Thompson simply saying, you've been warned. Nothing has changed. Rome has never changed. Rome's not going to change here in America. The Roman Catholic Church will be victor, come hell or high water. And it is the only power on the earth, foreign and domestic, that has the power to overthrow our constitutional republic. and that it will do and is doing and has been doing almost since the founding of this country. Little by little, making us Catholic through the laws of our own government. And Protestants have failed to raise sufficient voice in protest to correct it and reverse it and put the papacy back in his little clown box where he belongs. If he says we can scarcely claim exemption from the charge of ignorance if these lessons of history do not teach us wisdom. He continues by saying it'll be observed that the Pope does not speak alone of the election of bishops and sacred ministers of the Church. If this were the only matter of controversy, all fair-minded men would be disposed to leave it to the Roman Catholics themselves to settle the question, whether this power should belong only to the Pope or be shared by them. But he goes further and talks about, quote, other affairs which concern the ecclesiastical discipline called exterior, unquote, by which he undoubtedly means all those matters of whatsoever nature, whether religious, social, or political, and I will include the word economic, which are involved in the papal policy of making everybody, quote, firmly attached to the See of Peter, unquote. Now, did you catch the significance of this? That the papacy is going to use religious, social, political, and economic matters, exercising its authority in all of these realms to make everybody attached to the See of Peter, to make you a slave, a bond slave to the See of Peter, to the papacy. He's going to use religious, social, and political and economic means to make everybody in this country, once called Protestant, to be directly attached and dependent upon the See of Peter. Now think about your Social Security card for a minute. Well, that was an institution of our government, not the Pope. Prove it. Our Social Security benefits makes us paupers all of our lives and gives us a false promise of security when we get old. It's a papal dictation. It was implemented by our government because our government serves the papacy and not Christ and the people. By every means, religious, social, political, and economic, through our government, the papacy is making us entirely dependent upon him and answerable to him. Sound outrageous? Keep listening. R.W. Thompson will make this point even further as we continue in the book. He says these quote-unquote other affairs will more distinctly appear when the nature and the scope of the doctrine of papal infallibility are understood. Let there be no difficulty, however, at this point about the source of this tremendous power of the Pope, a matter which will be the subject of more minute inquiry later. The Pope himself considers it as having divine sanction, not as derived from any concession made by human powers. The author last quoted says the Pope's temporal power, that is his kingly power, his power to rule over the people, quote, is the natural consequence of his spiritual power, which means that wherever the Pope has spiritual power, he must have political power also, because the latter is necessarily consequent upon the former and cannot legitimately exist independent of it. So the Pope, if he's going to wield his spiritual power, must get control of your government, because it is the government by which he imposes his spiritual power. You notice the Roman Catholic priests, unlike the Protestants, don't go door to door with their Bible in their hand using the Scriptures, the leading and teaching of the Holy Spirit, to woo you to convert to the Roman Catholic Church. No, they don't bother with that. They know Roman Catholicism is not expanded by proselytizing. They do it through the government to make you Catholic by force. And the Roman Catholic, the papacy spiritual authority cannot be usurped over the people unless the government enforces it for him. Therefore, the spiritual is over the temporal, and the temporal government must serve the papacy. And the battleground for the Roman Catholic Church, the battleground for the papacy, is not door to door, wooing the minds and hearts and souls of men. No, the battleground for the Roman Catholic Church and for the papacy is Washington, D.C., where all the power is, where all the temporal power is, and converts it from a servant of the people to a servant of the Pope. And through the government then, Roman Catholicism is imposed simply by the Roman Catholics in the government who rewrite the laws, write laws that are consistent with Roman Catholic canon law, all of which are designed to make the Pope the end-all and be-all of the nation. Now he says, and he supports this extraordinary claim, which is also made by Pope Pius IX himself by publishing at length another papal bull issued by him in 1860 against the despoilers of the church, against those who despoil the church, wherein he insists that his temporal power is derived alone from God and is absolutely necessary to the Roman Catholic Church, inasmuch as it is indispensable to him that he shall, quote, possess such an amount of freedom as to be subject in the discharge of his sacred ministry to no civil power. That is, that he must be above all governments and independent of them all, and have that, quote, amount of freedom, unquote, and irresponsibility to the constitutions and laws which shall enable him to do as he pleases. No civil government, no power on earth can define the Pope's jurisdiction or his power or the extent and reach of the papacy. There's no tribunal on the earth that can bring his pedophile priest to justice. If a pedophile priest is prosecuted in this or any other country, it is simply by the acquiescence of the Roman Catholic hierarchy, because no civil jurisdiction has jurisdiction over the Pope and his priests. They are sovereign, so they claim, and so the people acquiesce. This is the rule of Antichrist. The whole world wanders after the beast. He may do as he pleases. It is his divine right that no civil power should hinder him or empower him. He stands alone, the supreme power in the world. He says there is no difficulty whatever in deciding what all this means. The author of this book and the Pope mean the same thing and agree in tracing the temporal power to the spiritual alone. The Pope says it's necessary for the universal church, that is the Roman Catholic Church, that he as a prince shall be subject to no civil power on earth. Without this absolute independence, the church cannot, in his opinion, exist consistently with God's decrees. The logical consequence, therefore, is this, that wherever this church is to be maintained, wherever this Roman Catholic Church is to be maintained, this same political independence must exist. For if in Rome this political necessity is an essential part of religious faith, it is equally so everywhere. If the Roman Catholic Church cannot maintain itself in Rome as God requires, without having all its children submit to this combined influence of the Pope, it cannot do so in the United States without a like submission. Whatever is a necessary part of its faith at one place is equally so at all other places. And can it be doubted that if this doctrine were let alone to work out its logical and legitimate results in this country, it would subject our institutions to perpetual assaults on the part of the subjects of this quote-unquote foreign prince who owe their quote-unquote first duty to him. They would do or not do as he should command, obey the laws or not obey them, as he should decide the welfare of the church to require. It would erect a papal government within that of the United States with rival and antagonistic powers to this extent that whatsoever the government of the United States should decide to do, not agreeing or accepting to the Pope, would be opposed by his obedient subjects here, who would put their obedience to him upon the ground that he is in the place of God, and therefore his word is God's law. They're going to replace this government with a papal government. And they're going to do it through a rival and antagonistic government that lies within this country. I'm going to take the time to explain this. As Avro Manhattan so eloquently said in his book, The Vatican Billions, the Roman Catholic Church acknowledged early in its history that the papacy's temporal power could not be asserted over the people unless there was a means to enforce it. And so they broke up the world into bishoprics. And every Roman Catholic bishop in all the dioceses and bishoprics in the country constitute a shadow government hidden in plain sight that is active in politics and every other realm of human life in every nation where there are Catholics. And they simply make sure that the kings of the earth obey the divine right sovereignty of the Pope. And through those kings and princes impose the spiritual power of the papacy. You hear all kinds of talk in the mainstream and even the alternative media about the shadow government, but nobody will tell you who they are. And those who do try to tell you who they are misinform you. The shadow government in every nation is hidden in plain sight. The local bishop of every diocese in the United States is the shadow government of the Pope. And they oversee the political officers in place to see to it that they adhere to Roman Catholic canon law, that they remain friendly to the papacy. They continue to promote the Pope's temporal power over the people. And that slowly but surely, the government of this country trods along and plods along to become a papal government. The most powerful man in every location is the local bishop. That he even controls your city council. Check me out. Political activism is their number one job. Religion is just a cloak and cover. That's why nobody pays any attention to them. Oh, that's just a Roman Catholic bishop over there. Well, he's doing his civic duty, sitting on this commission and that commission and every other commission, and those that he doesn't have time to sit on, he appoints other Roman Catholics to sit on. And notice how much power they have. Well, they're just dutiful people, that's all. They're very concerned about our civil affairs, and they're just good citizens. Oh, really? Well, who do they pay their allegiance to? Their nation or their pope? And I think you'll find the answer to every woe in this country belongs to the unobserved, unacknowledged fact that the local bishop in every community is the most powerful man there is. The Roman Catholic Church is the powerhouse of every neighborhood. The Roman Catholic bishop oversees the priests. And do you know where they get all their information, their ability to control and to influence and to govern? From the confessional box. A street-level intelligence system that rivals anything that the CIA, MI5, MI6, ISI, the NKVD, nobody can equal the power of the information and data mining processes taking place in the confessional box of the Roman Catholic Church. It's as simple as that. Roman Catholics, being loyal to their church and loyal to their pope, keep an eye on your neighborhood. And they may even do it through Neighborhood Watch. And if there grows up a heretic within their watch, like Tom Fress, they report to the priest in the confessional box. And the priest of the confessional box reports to the bishop. And the bishop reports to the archbishop. And a parallel note goes out to the local Jesuit provincial. And then they take whatever steps they can to ruin his life by calumniating him, falsely accusing him, discrediting him by any means available to silence him. That's how the system works. It's hidden in plain sight. Admiral Manhattan laid it out in terms that cannot be misunderstood. And listen to what R.W. Thompson is saying. Constantly talking about the Roman Catholic hierarchy and how they control Roman Catholics. And Roman Catholics are in every neighborhood of this country. And they're politically active, vigilant. Because grace is infused when they serve the church. And how better way to serve that church than to impose Roman Catholic canon law insidiously, little by little, by every means possible. From the local school board that selects the text to be read and taught in the schools, all the way up to the White House, the advisors to the President of the United States, and even those who sit on the Supreme Court. And if you'll take a good look, there are no Protestants on the Supreme Court. They're Catholics. 3 Jews, but the rest are Catholics. And as to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time in American history where there is not one Protestant on the Supreme Court. R.W. Thompson had it right. Avro Manhattan had it right. And unless the American people rise up to these realities, they can't use the excuse of ignorance. Because R.W. Thompson and so many others that we've been reading on Inquisition Update over the years have warned us and warned us and warned us and warned us. Just because the warning doesn't come over Fox News and CNN doesn't mean that this is not a legitimate warning. We have 2,000 years of indisputed history to verify these claims of Averill Manhattan and R.W. Thompson. R.W. Thompson is simply building on the history that was written over those 2,000 years to make these erudite assessments about the gravest threat to our Protestant constitutional republic, and he makes no bones about it. It's the Roman Catholic Church. It's the Roman Catholic Church. They're going to overthrow this government. And I maintain to you today that day has arrived. Because we have become like Catholics. Passive. Just acquiescent. Too busy being busy to pay attention to what really matters. And we've just literally, though we profess him with our mouths, have swept Christ off the throne and have allowed Antichrist to take his place right here in America. R.W. Thompson saw it happening. R.W. Thompson knew how it was going to happen back in 1876, and he wrote this book. And it should be read by every American in this country, Protestant or Catholic or atheist. It should be read by every American in this country. Anybody who loves the national sovereignty of the United States and hopes to be free of tyranny and free of terror and free of Roman Catholic canon law should read this book, The Papacy and the Civil Power by R.W. Thompson. You'll find a link on my website, inquisitionupdate.org, under resource books. I'm reading this book on the air because many people can't see well enough to read. Many people can't read and comprehend what they read. And I've been gifted to some level of being able to read and discuss these books to everyone's understanding. And I feel this book and these other books that we read here on Inquisition Update are vitally important to anyone who calls himself Christian. Now, R.W. Thompson continues. He says, this author demonstrates the character of the papal theory still further by showing that the Pope is a king. Not because he was ever made so by the people anywhere, even in the papal states, but because he is Pope. And as the head of the Roman Catholic Church, holds the papal states for the good of the Church. Therefore, he says again, he is not a foreign power in that sense of the word, still holding fast to the idea that the kingship of the Pope is necessary wherever he is head of the Church. The meaning is still the same as before, that he cannot be Pope without being a king also. That although he is a foreign prince insofar as he wears the crown of a foreign country, yet he is not so in any country to his followers who owe him the obedience of a domestic king. That as the Roman Catholic Church cannot exist without a pope, it cannot exist without a king, and that wherever there are Roman Catholics, no matter under what government, they must obey this Pope King, even at the hazard of disobedience to the laws that protect their persons and their properties, when he shall consider it necessary to the welfare of the Roman Catholic Church to remove these out of the way. And that is where we're headed. Overthrow of our government in replace of the Pope's divine right rule. We'll see you tomorrow on Inquisition Update.